process again, external observation. Applicant goes online and enters the standards for an external observation. So once again, I've looked at my summary and I've decided on the ones that I want the external observer to observe. And we come back to that same question again about how big do you make this? How many standards do I ask the observer to observe? I've never had an external observation done before. I didn't know whether they might look at 2 or 3 or 15 or whatever. So I chose 7. And when my external observer came, I said to her, I wasn't really sure how many standards to choose, and she said that she thought that 7 was a reasonable number. The last observation she'd done, the person had quite a few more than that. So it really is up to you, but it was certainly my experience. So you go online, you nominate the standards, the Institute allocates an observer. So when you go back on your online application again, you will see the name of an external observer that's been allocated to your application. And the next thing that happens is that they come and visit for the day, and then they upload their report. So that's the process. In my experience, I needed to design the day. So I needed to work out exactly what I wanted to showcase. As I said, I chose the 7 standards, and it takes a little bit of time, a little bit of thinking to ensure that the activities and the things that are going to happen during the day need to meet the standard. So once again, it doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be, you know, all the bells and whistles and all the fancy stuff that we might do from time to time. At the end of the day, they are commenting on those standards. Obviously, I chose standards that were difficult to cover in documentary evidence. And my little tip here would be to do what you're good at. It's quite a nerve-wracking thing, although once it got going, it wasn't a big challenge as such. But leading up to that, you want to feel that you're doing just your normal stuff, you know. It's a bit like, you know, with prac students when the supervisor comes from the uni. You know, they want to showcase a really good, confident lesson, not necessarily the time when they, you know, might be trialling something that they've never done before. And that's my view as well. So choose something that you do on a regular basis, and it will, you know, be less stressful, I think. So I went online and entered the standards. I received an email fairly quickly, within a couple of weeks, from my external observer to arrange a date. So all the communication was then between myself and the external observer by email. And she asked for a schedule, and she also asked for how the standards would be met. So this is the beginning part of my schedule. I decided, I had 4 interns at the school at the time, and I decided I would design my day around professional learning for those interns, whereby we would discuss aspects of pedagogy together in a TPL session. I would go and do a number of demonstration lessons, and then some follow-up TPL. So in the big picture, that's what my day was about. So the external observer received the schedule. She also received a page that listed all the standards and how I was going to address those briefly. And I think they really just want you to think hard about exactly how you're going to meet each standard before they come. The external observer arrived, and a bit of an overview of the school. And then she was provided with copies of documentation for the day, because you've got in your head exactly what this day is going to look like, but you need to make it clear to the external observer and provide them with any documentation that will support that. So this is just part of this is a PowerPoint presentation as part of the TPL before the DEM lessons, and I just saved this to PDF and printed it off for the external observer. A copy of the lesson plan for the day. This is a file that the single intern used to make notes during the DEM lessons. And the external observer needs time during the day to write the reports. So that needs to be factored in, really. I didn't realise that until she arrived on the day. So I guess maybe it varies between observers, but my observer, by the time she left at the end of the day, it was all done and dusted. So she'd observed the standards, we had discussions around each of the standards, we talked about the documentation, she'd written the reports and uploaded them to my application and gave me a copy of the report. One other thing about the external observation is that, and I'll speak about this in a moment, it actually fast-tracked my application because it kind of made me get organised. And so it was a turning point in my mind in regards to getting my application done. So following that, I finalised the documents to be used. I was now uploading all of the documents and allocating the standards, and I began to write my annotations. For me, I wrote them all at once. I found it easier to sit down with that pile of paper and actually write an annotation for the first one, move to the next, write an annotation for the next one. Just bear in mind, it can be quite challenging writing an annotation if you've listed a number of standards, because it's what you say about the document that supports your application. So if you're trying to cover too many standards, I would say it's this is a situation where less is more. So if you're needing to cover any more than 2 or 3 standards, it makes it difficult to write the annotations. That's what I found. The ones that were easiest to write were ones where I just had one standard for that piece of evidence. Does that kind of make sense? So for me, it was easier to think through that process of, once again, as I said, similar to writing school student reports. It did make it a little more challenging to upload. So I know some people, as I said, work through one document at a time completely and upload them over a period of time. So it will take time to upload them. I double-checked all the standards were covered online. I double-checked the application contained all the referee reports and the observation reports, because obviously you can get online and read your reports from your referees and also from the external observer. There's a point there right near the end where you're ready to go submit, where it says something, I can't remember now, it says something about principal approval. And I raced down, I said, have you done the principal approval thing, blah, 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 blah. He goes, the what? But there is a part where he needs to go, or she needs to go online and actually give final approval. You want a high quality result, and that's important because it's about your own teaching experience. So I think to each person, and it's certainly not just HATs that are working through this process, we've got quite a lot of people in Hunter Central Coast region that are not in the highly accomplished teacher role that are going through this, but you want a really high quality result. Organisation is critical. It takes longer than you might think. Certainly the case writing student reports. You can't work on it for short periods of time. It's not like, oh, I've got 15 minutes now before class, I'll just do a little bit of that. And it's not the way writing student reports works either, is it? You do what you can at school, but ultimately you need to take it home. I certainly did. And in the peace and quiet, ideally, at home, you can sort of get your head around how it's going to work. Organise your thinking and your filing around the documents, not the standards, if you know what I mean. It's a subtle difference, but it's the way you're thinking. You've got to think about each individual document. Consider the size of the application. In my case, I decided that I tried to have 2 different pieces of evidence for each standard. Now that might just be a document that's covering a number of standards, or it might be 2 pieces of documentary evidence, or it might be a referee and a document. Now I can't stand here and say that that's necessary, but that's what I did, because I wanted to be sure that each standard was being well met. In my case, external observation fast-tracked my application. Track your referee involvement. That will save you a lot of time and a little embarrassment trying to keep track of where they're up to. And the last thing I wanted to say was take pride in the process. It isn't easy, but then no accreditation process in any industry is easy. But it is nice to actually look at and remind yourself of all the great things that you've done in your career. So in the process of having all those pieces of paper and trying to work out how to upload things and all the rest of it, take pride in what you've done and the application that you put forward. It certainly is a nice feeling when you get to that point where you can click submit.